My guest today, unless you've been living under a rock, everybody in software testing should know who he is. He is James Bach. He is the creator of the rapid software testing methodology. He's an internationally known teacher, author, and consultant. He was one of the founders of the Context-Driven Testing School, a charter member of the AST, Association for Software Testing, the creator of session-based test management, and has been an expert witness on testing and software quality in court proceedings. So, hey James, how you doing?
Doing great. Happy to be
Yeah,
here.
it's good to see you. One of the, I was thinking about you and me, and it was funnily enough when I was looking through stuff, we, we've known each other over 20 years now, and
Yeah.
I first met you at the British Computer Society SIGIST in 2002.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how long ago it was. And you gave the keynote that year or that year.
Yeah.
I think and tell me if I'm wrong enough, but I always have this in my head. I think you were talking to me something about like horse training or something like that. I can't there was something you
Uh,
were interested in, and it was like, why is this guy talking to me about training horses?
could have been. Yeah. It's my my father has had a friend who was the second female professional female jockey in the history of the UK, apparently.
Okay.
Uh, and uh, I had been hanging out with her, and she told me all about. She's a horse expert, obviously, and like to think about systems thinking as it applies to horses.
Yeah, that's it.
So she had been telling me all about how a horse is a system. A horse. I remember she said a horse is a system that seeks to maximize its own comfort, and you have to understand that if you want to take care of horses. And she's just really fascinating lady, uh, Renaissance woman, and anyway, got me
Yeah, I
in
remember.
and all that.
Yeah, because the next year I gave the keynote at the SIGIST, which I think is still running actually, and I did a talk. This was what, July 2003, I think, or something, and I gave a talk about how outsourcing was going to dramatically impact the software testing industry, and was kind of like not roundly but fairly dismissed by a lot of people that, oh, it's impossible to outsource. And I'm like, trust me, I think I was working at UBS at the time, and like everyone's talking about, how do we ship this somewhere else and labor arbitrage, and I was just starting to get into all that. um
I think that happened.
yes.
I think you called that one.
If I remember correctly, that did happen. And then what we worked together on, when I was at Barclays, that was
Yeah.
2010. You did a whole bunch of RST classes and consulting with me there for that team.
Yeah, and I remember. Do I remember correctly that I I went to Pune where you guys had
Yeah.
a test lab, and you were using Cognizant, but you weren't using any Cognizant managers. I remember
No, no.
because isn't it fascinating that I think I've taught in 26 countries, and I think the country with the most creative, passionate testers that I've come across is actually India.
Mm.
But they're also the country with the worst managers. Like,
Yeah.
something weird happens in India when you become a manager. You just become this strange.
There's certain aspects of the management culture there, because I completely agree with you. And I wrote a whole blog post about it, but that Barclays team that we put together and all the training, there's like 100 heads of testing that sprouted out of that. There's like CIO, like
Yeah.
the I just saw the other day from, I don't know if you remember this woman named Tanu. She's like a lawyer in London now.
Tanu, yes, I had a video of Tanu as a young tester doing fantastically on a testing exercise. She ended up, didn't she end up going into some other field or
Yeah,
something?
she's a lawyer now in
A
London.
lawyer.
Yeah, no, I think she's a
Right.
partner at a law firm now. She's done amazingly well for herself.
Wow,
Um,
I'm not surprised. Wonderful.
yeah, but that,
At one time you called her a marine of software testing. You just tell her to take a hill and she'll
mhm.
take it.
Yeah. That's just somebody where you give them the right tools and the right context and mind frame,
Yeah,
and they just go for it.
yeah,
It's in their DNA. But the Indian management culture can tend towards hierarchy and kind of, waiting your turn and everything else. And we don't encourage that or teach people that, so that it can have a stifling effect. And I very famously, when I was doing that gig with Cognizant, didn't allow any of the management there, didn't even allow them to have key cards into our building. And they would complain all the time when we would do reviews, because we had like, 1 or 2% attrition with that team, which was insane at the time, for an Indian offshore vendor. But they
yeah,
would complain. The manager would complain because they're like, well, they feel more like Barclays employees and more loyalty towards you than they do towards
yeah,
Cognizant, and we're having a hard time like managing their careers and stuff because they have
yeah.
a different perspective on things when working with you, and it can be difficult. Um,
Yeah,
yep.
it can be. And I remember I did a talk for Cognizant in Pune, and I just felt like I could feel in the room how uncomfortable the management there was with the things I was saying.
Hmm.
Fomenting rebellion. Uh,
I think it's changed quite a bit because the whole model out there was built on this kind of labor arbitrage QA army model,
yeah,
where they're just throwing bodies at it. Like
yeah,
this idea that the more people we have testing, the greater coverage we'll get, the less time it will
yeah,
take. Which, none of that's true. But that's how a lot of their global pricing models work. So they, offset high cost locations with all those people in offshore. And when you can find ways and means of doing things better with, the same amount or less people, that kind of runs counter to a lot of their, lot of
I
their.
know. I mean, that's one reason why that side of the business is not very interested in hearing about optimization, working smart in different ways. Like, what you mean, bill less hours? All you hear is bill less hours. You mean, why would we want that exactly? Uh, we want to bill a lot of hours. That's what we.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, uh, yeah,
yeah.
but that's what I call the fake testing industry. It's a whole industry that's devoted to fake testing. And the dynamics of it is it goes like this. First, you don't hire any testers. And people go, "You mean you didn't test this software? Are you crazy?" That's totally irresponsible. So you go, okay, I'll hire testers. So then you hire real testers, and you go, oh my God, these testers are so annoying to deal with. They're constantly complaining. And then you go like, oh, I get it. How about I do this? How about if I hire fake testers and they don't really test, but they push paper around and they do various rituals of testing, but they do a lot less complaining. They find fewer bugs, which means that we have less responsibility because we didn't know about it. And when someone comes back and says, "Didn't you test the software?" You could just shrug and throw up your hands and say, "Oh, well, we did. I mean, I hired all these testers from India, from Pakistan, from China, from wherever I could get them cheap, and they did all these test cases and." They're certified, and like, what more can one do? We, you know, What I would you like me to open a vein and bleed on the pavement for you? I have done all anyone could possibly ask. And then, oh, I'll tell you what, I'll fire those testers. Oh, those bad testers that didn't find the bugs. And they'll hire more fake testers. Oh, did I call them fake testers? I mean professional testers.
You meant
I
QA.
think that's the dynamic because
Mm,
I found myself wondering about 20 years ago why do people continue to hire people who obviously aren't getting much done with their testing, but they are generating a lot of paperwork. um, it must be that there's some other benefit that they
mm.
get other than finding a lot of bugs for the money.
See, I think, and I find this with a lot of management, right, is that they say they want good testing and want the information you can help and manage risk. But the same thing with the kind of 20-year view on this. I refer to it as kind of caretaking management, where the 2 to 3 year career path or tenure of somebody at a firm that's gotten shorter and shorter. People don't live with the consequences of their decisions around testing and quality and risk anymore. So
Right.
kind of the moral hazard career wise is driven out of that. So people say they want to have good testing and understand risks, but when you bring information to them, and you know how I talk about this, we talk about risk, we talk about the business impact, we talk about finding complex problems. When you present them with that information, they really don't want to know that.
Yeah.
And they really do. And I've seen this more viscerally in probably the last 4 or 5 years of people really not wanting to know that. They just want to see how many tests did you run? What was the pass fail ratio? And it seems to accelerated quite a bit towards just putting your fingers in your ears and not wanting to hear it. Because when you give them that information, I find people generally, well, okay, though that's not really your job. Is I don't really want to know that, or they or change their reports or ignore it.
Yeah, it's a perverse set of incentives, I suppose. Um, I can understand somebody who strategically doesn't want to know something so that they won't be responsible for it. What I don't understand so much is people who believe their own baloney and they really think they're doing good testing,
Yeah.
and they will not hear anyone contradict them. Like, no, 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 this is the way, this is good testing. This is good
Mm.
testing. I've got all these test cases. Test cases are a good measure of testing.
Yeah.
I read it on a blog.
But
I
that
read it
that's
on a
because it's
blog.
hard. That's because doing it well is hard. And what I find is people who are focused on that, like, that, as Michael calls it, the tool fetish people.
Yeah.
It's like they want to take the easiest and least thoughtful and cosmetic and shallowest part of testing and try and make that as sexy as possible and spend all
Yeah.
their energy focusing on something that really I feel derive the least value for my clients from. But that's what they want to focus on because it's easy to do. You can contain it superficially in test cases or
You
scripts
said
and things like
easy.
that.
That's another dynamic that I see. If you notice that a lot of test tool companies market their services, their tools, saying this makes testing easier.
Mm,
And imagine marketing to Michelin starred chefs. Like, here is a cooking tool that makes your cooking easier. They won't be interested in that.
right.
What professionals are interested in, what professional golfers, what professional pilots, they're not interested in make it so that I don't need skill anymore to do this thing that I love to do at a very high level. What they're interested in is a tool that gives them more power. that lets
Right.
them do things they couldn't do before. That's what's fascinating to them. Don't sell me a tool that makes testing easy. Sell me a tool that makes testers powerful. And if you
Right.
look at developer tools, developer tools are sold based on this makes you a more powerful developer. Here's an IDE that you could do incredible things with. Oh, think of what you're going to be able to do with this. Not finally, finally, you don't have to have any skills anymore to be a developer. Aren't you happy? Aren't you a happy developer? No, no, I'm not
Yeah.
happy. Why would you?
Yeah.
You
Well,
mean
when you talk
anybody
to
can
good
do my job
developers, like
now?
writing code is not like generally the biggest part or complicated part of their job. It's the problem solving part that is, and that's where they need, powerful tools. Writing test cases and all that kind of stuff is the lowest value on the food chain for testing, but that seems to be where 90% of the energy is in the market for trying to make things. I've asked people this time, they try and sell me their, automated, framework defect predictinator or whatever it is, and I'm like, yeah, well, you can write, thousands and thousands of test cases off of this automatically. I'm like, I don't know if I want thousands and thousands of test cases. Can it help me make any better decisions about risk or strategy or approach? And all that stuff it requires skill.
Have you
I want. Go ahead.
people come to you about with AI tools? They want you to try out their AI tools. Has that been happening to you
Oh
recently?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, so somebody just came to me yesterday with their fancy AI tool. Okay, and I said to them what I say to everybody about this. It was this tool that takes your source code and makes diagrams of it to help you understand it better and thus test it better. That's the idea, right? So I said this. So this is an AI tool that uses generative AI to do this. And the guy's like, yeah, yeah. I mean, do you think this would be a good tool? Would you be interested in this tool? And I said, well, how can I trust it? How can I trust it? Have you done extensive deep testing of this? Or are you just assuming that it works? And he said, well, we haven't done deep testing of it yet, but you can try it, and we haven't had anyone complain. Oh, okay. So you want me to aim this thing at a complicated code base and carefully, painstakingly analyze everything that it does to make sure that it hasn't left anything out? Because it sounds like none of your customers have done that, because it's a lot of work. I would be shocked if they did that, because it's a lot of work.
Mm.
And it sounds like you're offering me a new kind of jet plane, and no one's complained about it crashing yet. And maybe I can just take it for a spin, and it won't crash when I'm in it. Why would I think that an airplane should crash? I'm such a negative thinker. Can't I just be positive and optimistic? So the guy said, well, you can just try it. And it's like, anybody can try things. What you're hoping is that I'm going to start using this, and that the sunk cost bias, I'll invest enough of my time in it that I will want to believe that it's good enough. But my problem is, I am skeptical, and I find that every single AI tool that I've seen so far is unreliable. And that's
Yep.
made me hyper vigilant. I look very closely at these things. It's like, waiter, there's a fly in my soup. And there's always a fly in my soup when I come here. Every single time. And there's more than one. So we'll just try the soup. I'm okay. But the problem is, 7 times before, I said, look, the other guy across, he's got flies in his soup. Everybody here is getting flies in their soup. And you're just saying, oh, just give us another chance. It's
Yeah.
no,
It's
no.
like that old
Take
Woody
your
Allen
job
joke.
seriously.
It's like that old Woody Allen joke where he says like, you know, the soup here is terrible, yeah, and the portions are so small. It's like there's a fly in the soup
Me,
and everything else that goes along with it. I mean, aside from the endless stream of people asking me to help build their products for them, which is, you got to give it to them, I guess, hand it to them. I guess if you're going to just ask for free consulting work, as soon as I, ask for any, what are you going to do for me type of stuff, they tend to go
yeah,
away pretty quickly. And again, it's like, are we really, is this where this is going to go with prompt engineering? I find that like, again, one of the lowest the problem you're trying to solve, I barely care about. And I think a lot of these tools and products and stuff are built by people that either one have never done actually any good testing themselves,
yeah.
and two have never had to live with the consequences of their decisions. It's just like we're just doing
They
things.
don't love testing. They don't
No,
love testing. I don't know of anyone who loves testing that wants to tell me, good news. You don't have to do this thing anymore that we love doing. Like, no,
yeah,
you can't
well,
love testing if you want something to pull the veil over your eyes and make it so you don't have to pay attention to it anymore. It's
mhm.
and these tools don't work. That's the thing. Here's something that's guaranteed. Anyone who builds anything with an LLM, with generative AI, they guaranteed the engineers who build it do not know how it works.
Mm.
They don't know how it works, and they don't know how to fix it when it's broken. If you report something like it just tried to tell me a limerick, that's weird. Like, did you ask it for a limerick? And I said, yeah. But why would this electric screwdriver be telling me limericks instead of turning and
Right.
putting screws in? Like, I just said out loud, I wonder if it can tell me limericks. And now it's stuck in limerick mode. And they'll go like, well, I don't know, turn it off and turn it on again. We can't control that. Like, you built this thing and you can't make it stop telling me jokes. No, you shouldn't have asked it to tell you jokes. We didn't put
Yeah.
that functionality in, sir. We just used an LLM, and it's not our fault. It's like nobody's taking responsibility. They can't take responsibility. They don't know why these things behave the way they do. And all they can think of doing is modify a prompt a little bit.
Right.
And that's the only solution that they have.
See, I
So
think
these things
I'm
are
coming
toys.
across two different types in with clients or people interested in stuff. There's I think vendors or consultants or people who are so far over their skis on this, and there's a lot of hype and buzz, and they're just making a lot of crazy claims about what it can and can't do. Then I talk to clients who are actually fairly nervous about it, right? That people are like, okay, I'm not really sure I want to unleash this. What does it do? So there seems to be a little hitting a little something solid with clients who are more concerned about safety, about transparency of models as well, which is not something a lot of these folks can easily do. So I have a little bit of, at least my enterprise clients, they're a little bit more okay. Well, let's, we're barely doing any kind of real testing, or a lot of those like we've just got some automated testing in place. We don't think we're ready to like unleash an AI bot, or which is what everyone's talking about now is bots to replace people for testers. I think people are pushing back on it a little bit, particularly with the stuff that's going on with OpenAI and deep think or deep sync or whatever it is.
DeepSeek,
That people
yeah.
are yeah.
I tried to use DeepSeek to have it give me a test plan, and yet again, of course, it bumbled around and didn't do a professional job.
Yeah.
Um,
But
and the
my,
thing
my
is,
view is
how I test this stuff is I I say to myself, all right, what's interesting is what happens when someone who doesn't understand testing uses this to as a tester.
Mm,
It's because I understand testing and I love testing. So when I ask it to do something, it might give me 70% of what I need. And then I have to clean up and try to fix the 30% I didn't get. And but I know what 30% that is. But
right.
someone who doesn't know this stuff, they don't realize that they didn't get good work. They have work may have critical problems in it, but they don't know that. There's no way for them to know that because they don't understand testing.
Right.
And
And I, was thinking about this the other day, and I'm doing a little bit of reading and writing about it because there's so much out there about safety and the technology, and like Michael and you are doing tons of you're streets ahead of anybody. I was trying to think about like the thing that bothers me most about it, and it sounds like a bit of a old man shouts at cloud moment, you know what I mean? But it's like to me, like testing and good testing and just building like technology is a deeply human thing. And I think there's aspects of trying to outsource, as it's a buzzword right now, but outsource your or buzz phrase, your critical thinking, outsourcing critical thinking and all that decision making. Like it really it pulls, it sucks all that out of it. And I think like good testing and finding interesting problems and understanding that is a part of the human aspect to this that you're really missing a lot if you think that you can encapsulate testing in just using something to write a test plan even for you or writing test cases
it all
for it.
comes down
And
to
we will
responsibility.
miss all of that.
It comes down to responsibility. And that's
Mm,
why I say AI stands for automated irresponsibility. It is an efficient way to replicate irresponsibility on a grand scale. It comes down to responsibility. Only humans can be responsible. It doesn't mean anything to say, is that a responsible machine? The
right.
machines don't understand responsibility. They're incapable of behaving responsibly. They just do what they do, and whatever that is. But we can't treat them as if they're part of the human network of social controls.
Mm, right.
But they're meant to simulate a human who is part of the network of social controls, and they do so well enough that naive people simply assume, as they are meant to assume, that you can trust this person as you would a human, and you absolutely can't. Um, so this guy just brought up what he said to me, and this is a wonderful little quote. This is 3 sentences, 4 sentences. Uh, so I said, "Hey, you haven't tested this tool, really, have you?" And he says, "Indeed, I haven't carefully tested this. It's actually impossible to test all possible combinations." Like, okay, so straw man argument there.
Were you ready for your lesson in
We
software
are,
testing you're about
yeah.
to get?
And then he said, "We are right now letting other users try it out for free and tell us if it works. Until now, nobody has complained about the map being wrong." Like, all right, so this is just callow. This is a child telling
Mm.
me that he can run a company. He's a very excellent driver, excellent driver, like Rain Man. um, and then he says, and it kind of reminds me of there's a person in my life that I knew for 10 years, and I trusted this person, and then this person betrayed someone that I love very much. And after that, I demanded I and my siblings all demanded an explanation from this person. What happened? Why did you do that? And this person refused to provide an explanation of any kind. And in fact, this person said, "That's all in the past. That's all in the past. Why? Just let it go." And it's like someone robbing a bank, and then you catch them, and they say, "That's in the past. Just let it go." Why are you so obsessed with what happened 10 minutes ago? Jeez. Um, and at one point, this person told me, like, "I don't understand, James. I'm I'm the same person that you've known for 10 years," and my reaction was, "But what I've discovered is I didn't know that person.
Right.
Now I actually need to get to know you, and you need to tell me who you are, because I can't go by any of that stuff." That's the problem with con artists.
Mm.
A con artist can't be discovered conning you and then turn around and say, "But you know me.
Right.
I'm not the
Right.
kind of person who would do that to you. I mean, you just did it, and the evidence is right there." So we can't go on that. So these people working with AI have not built credibility. The AIs have not built credibility. We and if I ask an AI if it's reliable, if it says yes, I'm reliable, well, you can't just believe that.
Right. Well, I can't remember. It's a political phrase going on these days, but it's easier to con somebody than to convince them they've been conned, you know. And a lot of these people,
Yeah.
believe in their own stuff. It's just, it's things that when you and this
Yeah.
drives me crazy. And I talk to Michael fairly frequently, and we go on and on about it. And I won't go on and on about it now, but like
You are
if
speaking of Michael Bolton.
Michael, yes, I'm sorry, Michael Bolton, yes, where the slightest application of critical thinking to some of these AI fanboys or tool people or whoever,
Yeah.
it's like you're a Luddite, you're just beyond your
Right.
Or the one I hate the most is, oh, yeah, you're invested in selling manual testing classes or
Yeah.
consultancy. So therefore, anything that might threaten manual testing, whatever the hell that is,
Yeah.
that's your whole angle. As opposed to being able to apply the slightest bit of criticism or critical thinking to what they're doing, you get flamed. I mean, I ignore most of social media these days anyway, but you can't have a rational discussion about any of it.
Yes, that is a big problem. And of course, so many people are just putting AI into their products, or they're embracing AI just because they're worried someone else will, and then make
Right.
all the money. I mean, look, I opposed the ISTQB before the ISTQB was created. I refused to embrace testing certification, and some people around me initially went along with me and my colleagues who were saying we shouldn't have certification, but eventually peeled off just because there's so much money to be made.
Mm,
I didn't make any of that money. I kept my
yeah.
self-respect, but no houses in the Bahamas for me.
You
Unlike
would
what I've
you want to hear
heard
something
some of
funny?
these guys got out of their embrace
Yeah.
of this rapacious rent-seeking baloney
Yeah.
called testing certification. But I mean, I have my self-respect and the respect of my son and wife, and I guess I'm gonna
Well,
have to do that.
I'm gonna come down in your esteem a little bit, James. Whatever that been, because we were talking about this at work the other day, and we promote and train people. If they will help people get their ISTQB certification at KPMG if they want, right? Um, and my opinions are well known on this, but we were laughing about it at work, and I said, and I brought out the pilot course from the ISEB. Remember that
Yes,
with
yes.
grow up? So yours
I
truly
said,
was on the pilot course when I was at
wow,
UBS in 1998. And
wow.
yeah, and I have that was before the ISTQB was created.
Well,
And
I took the very first BBST class.
oh yeah,
Yes, and I was thrown off it along with Michael Bolton. We were asked
of course.
to please stop taking the course by Kem Kaner.
Well,
And
I actually have my certificate number is 4.
oh, you're four of ISEB. Wow.
Yes. And I remember when I handed in the exam, it was like, whatever, it was worse than what they probably do now. It was just I think it was 30, 40 questions ever. And I remember handing it in and I was like, that's it. And they gave me the certificate. I was like, that's it. That's all we got to do. That was the end of it. And they were like, yep, that's it. And I'm like,
No.
okay. And then, shortly thereafter, started doing a little more research and clawing my way out of my matrix battery cell.
Well, it's
And
a good thing you did that because you later won the Testing Luminary Award.
yes, I did. Yes.
Uh,
Yep.
and if you hadn't gotten certified, you're like, who knows what kind of gutter you'd be in now.
That's right. All the impact of my life would have been for naught without
Well,
that.
I don't mind when people get certified. What I mind is when they take it seriously and they think they've accomplished something when they've accomplished,
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
nothing.
And my view on that is, look, I don't pay anybody's mortgage but mine, right? And our business, there is rent seeking on the recruitment industry from these people, from the certification people, and it's been a long term problem that and this is part of my resistance to it is that it actually drives down real wages, it drives down real skills because it gives the appearance of if you can get that certification, well then it's another tick in a box for a recruiter to look at. And long term, the arc of that is much more detrimental to our business and makes you less valuable, more easily commoditized, all that kind of stuff. So
I think it's gone a long way to destroying the testing industry. I mean,
I agree
we
with
have a
you.
testing industry right now that's hanging on by a thread, and lots of agilists out there who say, "Why do we need testers? Why do we need testers?" Well, what they're thinking of is they're thinking of incompetent testers,
Mm.
which indeed
We don't want those people either.
we don't want those. We don't want incompetent testers either. But it's so easy to be an incompetent tester who's certified. It was the day that I met a bubbly, buoyant fellow who told me that he'd never done testing before, but he studied for 3 hours and got certified as a software tester. That was for me the like, right, exactly moment. Like
Yep.
this this is gonna completely ruin our industry, our whole reputation.
Yeah.
But testing has always been uh, a weak culture that's easily colonized
Yeah.
by the powerful people around it, and most people who are ambitious and powerful get out of testing. I'm a fluke for not getting out of it.
Same.
Yeah,
People are shocked when I've been doing it like 25 years. They're like,
yeah. There's not too many people like you and me doing it. When I got into testing, I joined a group of 400 testers at Apple Computer. I'll bet you not a single one of them other than me is still in it. Of course, that was 37 years ago. So there's various reasons why people might get out, like maybe dying a natural death, that sort of thing. But I fell in love with testing, and I've never been tempted to give it up. Although I have to tell you, I'm going to try to teach critical thinking to people who are not technical. I want to try doing that and
okay.
see if I can make some money at that. there's never a lot of demand to teach anybody critical thinking, but there's a possibility here now because of AI.
Right.
Because I think people understand that maybe we need to think critically while we're using AI. And there's evidence, there's some papers that have come out about how people's critical thinking abilities are being eroded by using AI.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I think that paper's been floating around a little. I started reading it yesterday. If we're thinking of the same one, it just made its rounds, and a couple people have sent it to me. But it always shocks me, and having worked and managed thousands of testers all over, it's got to be well over that now. Thousands of testers that have had work for me, or I've hired or trained or whatever. It's still shocking to me how little people study our business. People who are like in your career, and you don't study anything about our business. And to me, in my experience, testing, if you just learn a little bit, your powers get the multiplier effect of just learning a little bit about what you should be doing and focusing on. The value that you bring to an organization increases dramatically, but yet people just don't study what we're doing at all. I'm still to this day shocked by it, and still uncover people who just haven't read even some basic stuff on it.
Yeah, that's been true all along. That's why when I did my talk, Testing in the Next 10 Years, which I did 25 years ago, I said, in the next 10 years, I predict that testing will not change at all for 95% of testers. For 5% of testers who are ambitious, I think it will change because we're striving to develop the craft and improve our skills and learn different tools. But for most people, I think it's going to be the same in 10 years as it is now. Now, I think I was wrong in two ways. A couple years after I gave that talk, certification started becoming a big deal. And so I didn't predict that there'd be a lot of pressure on people to pay the money to the rent seekers and get the certification. And the second thing that happened, it's a few years after I did that, Agile became a big deal,
Mm.
which didn't really change testing, but it changed the way testing was packaged, and it changed the pressures on testers. That's the big thing, is that test managers started going away, which meant that testers were no longer protected by anybody because they were all working for people who didn't understand testing
Mm.
and implicitly wondered why anybody would want to have a career as a tester. So that
Yeah.
that started happening actually, quite a few years ago.
Well, the Agile Manifesto should be, somebody should write, a book on that, about the biggest case study for the law of unintended consequences ever. I
Yeah,
mean, people over processes, and they generated one of the biggest paper making industries. I mean,
yeah,
good God, the amount of process and rituals and all the other crap that came with that
yeah,
just throttled innovation and productivity under the guise of wanting to do away with all that. It's
yeah,
shocking the amount of stuff that's been done. And I agree with you. I think, but there's also this, like, again, with AI and everything else, you hear these old terms come back again, but people are talking about enshittification, right? So, like, the
yeah,
slow creeping downwards pressure of, I always felt like this with automation, right? Test automation, that wasn't making anybody faster or better. It was making a lot of people worse testers,
yeah,
and again, trying to find easy routes for things. So it actually brought the craft of testing down quite a bit when we were focused on automation. I think people's expectations out of systems and software in general is just getting that. I have to send you the link to it if you read it. It's a good article called, like, Never Forgive Them or something like that. It's
I read
about,
that. The never
yeah,
forget them. Yeah,
Yeah, and I agree with probably 90% of it. You know, it's
It's
just
a
like
wonderful rant.
designed. Yeah, it's a great rant. It's just you're just this all this is designed to make you put up with a lot of shit. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I think that's had a downwards pressure effect on on testing. You know what I mean? Like if you look like people going to CI/CD or like, oh, we can back out releases really, really quickly and automated release, like so we can just,
yeah.
undo things really quickly. That hasn't made anything better. It's just made people accept crap a lot. Your expectations are just so poor, just like we were doing here, trying to get on the right medium to have this conversation.
Yeah.
It's a living example.
Well, it part of that though is it makes me appreciate the few things that work well and are reliable. I gotta say, my fiber internet has been tremendously reliable, and of course, I don't. I have business fiber internet, which is really expensive, and I could have
Most
consumer.
people do not.
I could have consumer grade, but here's what the business grade gives me. Every time I've had a fiber outage, which I think in the 2 years I've lived here has been 4 times, maybe 4 or 5 times I've had an outage. I call the little number on the router that they installed in my dining room, and I get an answer within 10 seconds. Someone answers the phone and they immediately are talking to me. And uh, if they don't know what's going on, they say, okay, we're going to get back to you. And they've always gotten back to me. And I've always been sent through a very orderly system until I'm talking to the guy in the truck driving over to fix the fiber where the tree fell down. And, and he's telling me, okay, I think it's going to be 2 hours. I've been really surprised at how well it has worked and reliable it's been. And I'm grateful for that, for people who know their jobs and do their jobs. And I'm grateful for a Zoom. I've had really good experiences. For the last 5 years, I've been a Zoom user, a paying Zoom user, and I've been let down by Zoom a couple of times in a big way. And that seems amazing to me because I'm on Zoom and I do recordings on Zoom. I'm on Zoom almost every day, and I do recordings on Zoom that are important to me about once a week. So I think about it and go, wow, whoever is in charge of making things work at the Zoom company, my hat's off to you. I do not, by the way, work with Zoom or for Zoom or
I was
I'm
waiting
not
for. Where's
consulting
the?
for
We gonna ring
Zoom.
the bell here? Or?
I'm not. I don't have any relationship with them whatsoever, except I'm a customer who appreciates
No.
the reliability and performance that I've experienced. But you know what? They put this AI bullshit stuff in, right? A thing that summarizes meetings. We
Yeah.
played with it a little bit. It is completely unreliable.
Mm,
I mean, it's their fault, but it's not their fault, right? They didn't invent
right.
the technology. They just shrugged and said, "We assume our users will demand it from us, so we've got to put it in." It's it's almost like some religious thing.
Mm,
Like, we guess there's a new god that's shown up, and we all have to worship the new god. So uh,
yeah. I think
we
there's
all
just a
have
lot of.
Mithra features.
If there was a frenzy about it for a while, and I've seen people start to, when you start getting under the covers of it a little bit, or applications of use, they're like, okay, well, what does this really buy me? Like what am I getting for this?
You could
I
have
think
a
that.
summary of a meeting that will be 70% accurate, uh, 20% wrong, and 5% holy shit wrong.
Mm,
Like nobody said that. And
yeah.
now I have actually experienced this now. I had a client for the first time. a client use an AI summarizer to summarize a bunch of videos that I gave them, and then they reacted to the summary, and I had to say, no, that's not what I said. That's not what that was. And I didn't realize till halfway through reading the summary that it was AI generated. But then I
Right.
got to a place where it did something so bizarre that I thought, no human could have thought, no human would have summarized this in the way that this thing
Right.
is
Right.
summarized. This is so off base.
Yeah.
But some of what it said was accurate. But here's what it forced me to do. First of all, I said, hey guys, you're commenting on something that is just unreliable. So all your comments, just put them aside because it's unreliable. But the problem is they'd already read all this stuff and they didn't know which part represented my teaching and which part didn't. And they're
Right.
now their minds are poisoned. Like I can't go in there and
Yeah.
take out of their brains like you shouldn't have read that because that's not how I do things.
Yeah. Because it's easier for them to be wrong than you to try and convince
There
them that
was
what they understand is
there was
wrong.
one part where the summary said that my exercise was about how important it was to justify every test case, and it was the opposite point that I was making. I was talking about how the idea that we should justify everything is a trap that creates a hostile environment for testing, and so it was saying I was making exactly the opposite point as I was making. And somebody who commented said, yeah, I like this. I like that he says this. I'm like, so now I have to say, oh, I'm
That part
actually
you said you said.
right. Yeah, I know. Thank you for liking what I'm saying, but I have to inform you that I'm the opposite of that. And
Yeah.
so it's just introduced all this noise
Mm.
that's a little bit like your kitchen getting lightly flooded with 2 inches of silt that's drifted in. And now you can still cook in the kitchen and everything, but you have all this stuff and you're going to have to sweep and bring in a special cleaning service to clean it up. You can't just leave it there. All
Yeah.
this
And
sand.
who asked for any of that? I mean, I don't remember ever needing that, to have some auto transcription thing going on where if anything, most meetings I'm at these days, we just record actions. Like if somebody's going to
Yeah,
do something afterwards and we ping that around to people afterwards. But like this,
yeah,
it's actually we have quite a few laughs about it at work, whereas like trying to understand what the transcription said or the funny names they call people or the words they don't understand, it's not very useful. So what I want to ask you another question actually. So say you're mid-level tester working at XYZ, enterprise, and we want you to we just bought this new AI tool. Well, what would your advice be to that person who's being told to start using it, or we want you to start incorporating this, or like what would your advice be? And it can't be just quit because
my advice is to follow what Venkatesh Rao of the Ribbon Farm blog once said about AI. It's not an overlord, it's a child. Treat it like a precocious child who is looking over your shoulder and making suggestions. Like, I don't have any problem with somebody contributing ideas to what I do. Um, but I'm not going to say to the 8-year-old who is standing next to my chair as I'm monitoring the nuclear power plant, hey, Kenny, just keep an eye on things for me. I'm going to go get some lunch. Like, you don't do that. You don't say, like, oh, I've been in this pilot seat for 3 hours.
it's kind of
Hey,
like Homer with
kid.
that when Homer
Yeah.
Simpson puts that water bird on his
Yeah, the
butt. He
water
needs to
bird. You know, I remember that exact scene. The water bird. Yeah, you don't just leave a water bird pushing the silence the alarms button. I think that's what
Right.
it was like constantly stopping the alarm from going off, something like that. Um, you, that's irresponsible. So I would use an AI tool to independently analyze something and see if it comes up with any interesting ideas, anything I'd find interesting that's that I haven't thought of. See, unfortunately, when you're in these situations, management who has bought this tool often will not let you use it halfway. What
Mm,
they'll say is, well, the what it says on the box is that it totally eliminates the need for uh, complex testing. Like if you look at, came across them the other day, they tried to get me to use their tool, and I said, "Well, tell me what the capabilities of your tool are." And like they always do, these people, they said, "Oh, well, just try it." Like, just try it. Just invest my time in trying it, and you're hoping that I'll just. But has a bunch of crazy claims on their site. I just went there and just now, and it says still writing tests in 2025. Transforms your inputs into a comprehensive, ready to run test suite. Okay, and it says save hours every day with AI. It says stress free releases. It's basically making claims that uh, it will do. It, at one point, uses the word exhaustive. It's going to test exhaustively. Then you get in. I have tried. As a matter of fact, you get in and you find out. Oh no, there's no way that you can give it a spec and have it generate any test cases from the spec. No, it doesn't do that. There's
mm.
actually a line in their documentation where they say, like, coming soon, we hope to add a feature where it understands your business logic. So outside, they're like, it's like exhaustive testing, like you'll never miss a bug again. And then inside, they're like, it would be really nice if we could understand your business logic, and someday we will. Like as if business logic is like testing your logo or something. It's just a
Right.
little thing. It's not like
But see,
no
and
one
this
ever has
is,
bugs in their business logic. Come on.
yeah, and this is what drives me nuts about this, and you know, I'm not a fan of them as your sole source of what you're going to test from. But like even writing a test case, right? Extracting that and giving that to an AI to do. Who is going to understand the system? So testers can, from writing or running or getting involved in this, will learn something about the system that they're running, how to use it, how it's not to be used, what works, what doesn't work. There's, is a framework to try and branch off of different ways to test. I'm not, I've never been a kind of absolutist on anything other than not focusing on risk. So even if that even the smallest, least valuable part of testing, if you want to call it that, we extract that. This is going to be like people running a robotics, automobile construction factory and have no idea how to fix anything or what anything does, and you're just pressing buttons on things to generate it. Who is going to understand when things go wrong,
Yeah.
how to analyze it, how to fix, or what might go wrong? It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me that part, which is a good knowledge building, but you're never going to be able to completely encapsulate that in an AI, and that's what I see people wanting to do.
Yeah. Yeah. They want it. They wish that it could do things that it can't really do. But if you don't know much about testing, it does look impressive.
Yeah.
So one of the things I'm doing in my classes, is For every exercise that I give people, I always show them, here's what ChatGPT did in this exercise. So I've got all kinds of little exercises that do different things, and for each one, I'm for a bunch of them I've done this, not for everyone, but I'm going to do it for every single one, uh, where they can see the difference between their performance and ChatGPT's performance. And here's one thing that guaranteed that these test tools never do, and they do not perform any sort of inquiry. This is what an LLM is not capable of doing. An LLM cannot perform an inquiry. Now, if you tell an LLM, I want you to ask questions, it'll say, oh, okay, I'll ask questions. But then it won't do anything with the answers that you give. Or as I found with DeepSeek, I said, I need a test plan done professionally. And it said, okay, here's what you do. And it just dumped out this big template for a test plan. I said, whoa. No, I mean, I want you to walk me through it. And it said, okay, I'm going to, here's what you have to do first. And it gave me another big list it said, here's all the information we're going to need. And I said, whoa, step by step. And I said, okay. And then it said, let's start with this question. And it asked me a question. And I gave it part of an answer and ignored the other thing it was asking for. It actually was, at first it was accidental because its question had 4 parts. And I was trying to give it the 4 parts of an answer, but I accidentally clicked enter when I wanted to do a new line. So I only answered the very first, and the rest of them were just blank. And it said, okay, here's your test plan. And I'm like, wait, I didn't even answer all the questions. And it said, oh, you're quite right. Here's the next question. And then I didn't answer that question, and it said, here's your test plan. And it just kept skipping over this. And Michael and I have come up with a name for this syndrome. We call it manic syndrome, where the LLM cannot keep track of where the human is in the process.
All right.
So it's like, let's play patty cake, and then it's just beating your head with its hands. And it can't tell that you're doing this instead of playing patty cake. And so it's so excited to help you. I actually, come to think of it, it's a lot like an untrained dog that's trying to please you, but you're trying to get it to do this complex activity, and it's just like half-heartedly doing stuff and then running over to you saying like, can I have my treat now?
Right.
But if you didn't know that it was losing track of things, you wouldn't be able to tell it to stop. So this is why I read an article. Here's an interesting article. There's an article about how LLMs are not bad at doing historical analysis. Of like history, the actual like human history. And it was written by a professional historian who gave examples. And my reaction to that is, all right, but I'm not a professional historian. So when I ask it to do historical analysis, I can't do what you did in your article, which is you said it got this right and then this part it didn't get right, but it got that right. And that's pretty cool. Like I can't know which part is cool.
Yeah,
which part
people treat it like a search engine, and it's not.
It's not a search engine. What if I was building a house with it and I have no knowledge of how houses are built? How would I be able to evaluate it if it comes up with something and it's all painted, it looks nice? I just assumed that the wiring was done correctly, and then later the house burns down because the wiring wasn't done correctly, and they're like, "Well, it's your fault for using an LLM to build
Right.
your house." And like, but
That seems to be
thought,
the industry response is, well, what were you using it for that anyway? You shouldn't use it.
yeah, didn't you
What the hell
notice
am I supposed to use it for?
Did you notice the tiny little thing at the bottom that when you opened the package that said, "This sometimes builds dangerous houses," and like we put it on there. Like, that's your fault now. That's why I like the new European Union product liability directive that just came out. Have you
Mm,
seen this thing?
mm,
You should know about it in your position. The EU product liability directive is a new thing. In 2 years, it's going to be law in the EU, and it's worth reading carefully because it says what's going to be true in the EU is that if your product causes physical harm to a human, destruction of property, or destruction of data, then your company is liable for damages, whether or not you did anything wrong. It's called no fault liability. Doesn't matter if you did anything wrong. You could have say like, "Hey, we followed best practices. Too bad. Uh, guess you should have
well,
tested it better."
I'll say two things about that. One, I'm aware of it, but haven't read it yet. Two, the UK is not an EU anymore. I'm in London, so
Oh,
there's complex ways in which they are. But I would suspect any implication of that, just like they just refused to sign the AI declaration with the universal one, the US and the UK I think, will probably opt out of signing up for any protections like that. And it actually can be a little scary because I know James Christie, right, and all the great writing he does
yeah.
about the post office stuff. The law in the UK pretty much says that we're assuming computers are right. So you have to spend the energy. That's why a lot of that stuff that was going on with the post office, those people got
Yeah, yeah.
ignored or told that they were
Right.
wrong, is because the operating principle is that computers are correct. The output from computers are assumed to be
It's
correct.
just outrageous.
Yeah, and so a lot of these things, and I always say, just like when was it? It was a couple of years ago. I was at Sibos, which is a big international banking financial services conference. So it's a lot of the banks, payments agencies, things like that have this big conference every year. And this was all coming up around kind of payments around safety, open banking, regulation, and AI was starting to be talked about a little bit as well. And basically, all the regulatory talks that I went to there, they were all saying, well, look, we don't want to discourage innovation by too much, regulation, and none of it really has any teeth anyway. And so we want to encourage good behavior whilst not stifling innovation, which basically means to me they're not going to do anything and just watch it, because industry is so far out in front of the public sector and regulation on this stuff. It's not even like they're playing the same sport sometimes.
But the EU is influential. I mean, GDPR has caused
Yes, that's
American
true.
companies to change their software. My brother helped eBay become GDPR compliant, even though, I mean, obviously they're not only doing business in the EU. And also, Apple Computer is the EU told Apple Computer you can't keep changing the chargers every
Yes.
year like you've been doing, and so it looks like Apple is settled down and accepted USB-C as the charger, and that's because of the EU. So it might have some impact. I think that at least within the EU, the interesting thing is that uh, doing fake testing won't help you. because it doesn't matter if you can produce a bunch of documentation that says you tested.
Mm,
What matters is that you ship a product that actually doesn't hurt people.
right.
Unfortunately, there's two big limitations of the directive. One is it only applies to consumers, not businesses. So
Okay.
if you're a consumer, it's meant to protect individual natural people.
Right.
But I think businesses, their assumption is, well, if you get into a contract, that's your own fault. So if you use this product for professional purposes, you're not covered by the liability things. If you use it for professional and personal uses, you're covered if you use it for personal, when you're
Mhm.
using it for personal. So that's one thing that's kind of a bummer. Um, and so that's one big limitation, and the other one is, well, it's only covering safety. It's not covering software that sucks.
Right.
Software that doesn't do what it said it would do. As long as it doesn't hurt you,
Right.
it doesn't trigger the liability stuff.
Provable claim, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if the software could do nothing and the liability claim isn't gonna kick in.
Yeah.
But with respect to liability, it's pretty cool. It gives lots of powers to consumers.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think in the EU, what MUOC was they're continuing to strip some of that stuff out in the US, the consumer financial banking regulations and things like that. There's probably more protections here, but moving money around, open banking, some of that stuff, particularly in the kind of crypto world, a lot of that stuff, it figures out how to get around it pretty quickly. So I'm
The
not,
U.S. is actually going in the opposite direction.
yes, try
And
not to read the
so
news too much these days.
I stay away from the news too. It's just anger management. Wake me up in 2 years when we can do something about these yo-hos that are taking over.
Yeah, yeah. So look, I want to ask you another question here, and I'm gonna answer myself first because I think it's evident in our conversation so far, which is what do you think are the most common misconceptions about RST and the classes and the methodology or methods? Because my view is, and this probably be the
Okay.
easiest one,
The
is
the
that
number.
I'll say here's what I think
Okay.
that number one is, or mine is what I come across. Oh well, you guys are anti-tools.
Right. That's the number one thing. They think we don't. Both Michael and I are programmers. We
Mm,
make extensive use of tools. If anything, I'm biased. I'm weirdly biased in favor of tools. What we keep talking about is people using tools in dumb ways. And that's what we've been fighting all these years. But we use tools extensively. So I'd come out with a new class called Testers and Automation, and it's a class where we just talk about tools, about how to use them in smart ways. And I talk about in the class how most people, when they say test automation, what they mean is user simulation. And user
mm,
simulation is a powerful and important kind of automation. I don't use the term test automation, but it's certainly automation that helps testing. Um, and in my class, I talk about many other kinds of automation, which are not user simulation, but they're uses of tools to help us get things done. And I try to raise people's awareness of how many other ways we can use tools. The weird thing is that I think some of these people who talk about test automation are, in a way, more against tooling than I am, because they only talk about one way of using tools
mm,
and they're just not interested in anything else. Like, I'm interested in tool supported test design, tools that generate test data from models. I use that a lot. And I use tools that I call this augmented experiential testing. Tools that help my experiential testing, which is my word for manual testing. Experiential testing can be more effective if you have tools that are watching you test. So I've developed a recorder that watches me whenever I'm doing any web-based testing. Every single thing I do, every interaction I have with the product is recorded.
Mm.
It's continuously records for days and days. I don't have to think about it and turn it on. It's always on. And then I can create visualizations of my testing from the data that it collects. So all that kind of thing. I have tools that uh, turn on lights of different colors when I do different things of my testing. I have tools that talk to me when it notices problems in the log, and it'll speak up through the microphone. A little electronic voice
Really?
says error. Yes, I demonstrate these tools in class, and this is all taking experiential testing. And some people say, "Oh, well, why didn't you just call it manual testing?" I don't call it manual testing for several reasons, but one reason is it's an inaccurate term because all testing is manual if you mean that you are
Mm-hmm.
involved in doing something. And so, what I'd rather talk about is rather be more specific. What I mean by experiential testing is I am reproducing an experience of an anticipated user. So I'm thinking of a kind of user, and I want to have an experience of using the product that is just like what they will experience. So that's experiential testing. And then there's interactive testing, which means that I'm in real time able to interact with the product, whether or not I'm recreating an experience. Both of those things are what people call manual testing. Well, as soon as you use the term manual testing, people associate that with manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
also somehow think you're not using tools. I can do experiential testing and still make use of tools. I can do interactive testing and still make use of tools. So tools for me are a partner. I'm a partnering with various tools in different ways, although I'm always in control of the tools that I use.
Yeah.
In
I
any
don't
case,
have.
that is one thing. RST is the biggest misconception people have is it's just you we're some kind of like Amish. Uh, I saw this comedy show on Netflix that had this skit of the Amish tech support guy. And he comes to the computer is having trouble booting, and he pulls out this wooden mallet and chisel and starts just kind of poking at the screen with it, breaks the screen, and then says, "Well, your screen's broken. We'll have to replace that." It brings up a one of those hand drills and like drills on the
Mhm.
keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say
um,
another one I think is like that, like the only teaching technique is like Voltairean ridicule, or you just all we do is argue, which is I mean, and I like what
right,
about the tool thing? People ask me about that with RST, or you or Michael, or even and Paul. I'm like, have you read a single thing that they've written, or have you ever spoken to them or watched a talk? Because there's literally a ridiculous and really impossible idea to have that you guys are anti-tool. The other thing is like have the same kind of like righteous anger about things, and then I reserve that for people who deserve it. But like I have seen you personally, incredibly kind and empathetic with new testers, with people who are trying to understand things. You couldn't be a
right.
successful teacher if you
This
weren't.
this yes. The misconception comes from, first of all, it comes from counter marketing by rivals. It does
Yes.
not come from people who've been my students. It
Mm-mm.
doesn't come from people who I've worked for. It comes from my
Mm.
professional rivals who I have expressed. Uh, I have suggested that they are competence challenged, and I have done so in ways that have embarrassed them, and
Mm.
they don't like me for that. And as why should they like me? Of course they don't like me, but um, I happen to believe that if you're going to present yourself as an expert, you should know what you are doing. And when someone claims to be an expert and they don't bother to learn the craft of software testing, they deserve to be called out for that.
Mm.
I also tell these people that if you think I misbehave, you should absolutely call me out for my own misbehavior. How about we all call each other out when each other misbehaves, and let's all play by that standard?
Mm.
Instead, I get attacked because I've called somebody out for misbehavior, and they don't realize that they're doing exactly what I'm doing. they,
Yes. It,
but they somehow don't see that I'm allowed to do that too. Only they're allowed. Only my rivals are allowed to be indignant. I'm not allowed to be indignant, according to them. So there's that just weird lack of self awareness among some of
yeah.
my
You
social
also
friends.
have, and it's not cult like, but you do have a lot of followers who like to me exhibit what you call the tiger cub problem, right?
The Tiger,
So
yeah.
yeah, if you are say something, they'll swarm behind you and don't have the context,
That may
skill,
be true.
ability, and then they're just tearing at things and
Yeah.
don't.
The funny thing about that is I am an anti-authoritarian. I tell anyone who's my student, I go, you want to be my student? Then you're on the path to liberation because I'm not here to build followers. I'm here to build peers. I want to build colleagues. Someday you're going to be my colleague and we're going to go straight across and in our relationship with each other. And I point to people like Pradeep Sundararajan, who started
Mm,
out as my student and is now he loves being a guru. He's written several books on software testing and runs a couple of software testing companies, and I'm very proud of him. And uh, he we have a straight across relationship now. And well, Michael Bolton and was sort of my student. I was definitely the senior partner in our original relationship, and but that's turned into something where it's completely egalitarian. And uh, I I'm an anti-authoritarian. I don't use coercion or authority when I teach. I tell everybody, look, I have strong opinions, and sometimes I can get carried away expressing my strong opinions. But I'll tell you, I do not expect you to share any of my opinions just because I said so. I expect you to treat it like a buffet, and maybe something's too spicy for you, so stay away from it. And whatever you do, I'm gonna try to help you become a better tester in your own mind by your own lights in your own way, even if that means you're going to disagree with me
yeah,
someday. Then
I
I'll,
think
I'll know that's fine.
we've
That's how
really
I do
mixed.
it.
I think it came to you can see where you can kind of see the date like where the high watermark hit with this idea of kind of conferring in the conferences and kind of like really presenting ideas and discussing them because I mean I don't go to many anymore and kind of fell out of love with it when they just became kind of confirmation bias, love fests, where everyone's just like anybody can get up and say anything, and there's zero,
Well, I know
discussion.
the year that it started going bad. It was 2011,
Mm,
and the reason it started going bad, from my point of view, I think the reason that it all fell apart is Kem Kaner decided that he would split from the rest of the context driven
mm,
community. Kevin Kaner and I had a disagreement that I thought would last a month and has lasted 15 years.
Mm.
And it's very sad because I had a 15-year collaboration with Kim that ended in 2011. And I think Kim's a great man. I think it is appropriate to say that. He's very, very influential on my work. We used to have big arguments and we would always resolve things. And we had a situation that developed in 2011 that caused a schism that couldn't be repaired, and he stayed mad at me. And that broke the community because Cam is such an organizer,
Mm.
and none of the people around him were organizers. I'm not an organizer. Michael's not an organizer. No one else. So we just revolved around Cam's passion for building communities. So when he stopped doing that, I think the motive energy of the context driven testing movement really just stopped, and we just had momentum of the spin that kept going. But without him to hold it together, because it was Kim who felt so strongly that the cast conference had to be done in a peer conference kind of way. It had to be done with
Right.
debate, and his personal energy and prestige, I think, made everyone willing to go along with that. But once he was gone, other forces of people who were squeamish about conflict. Ooh, let's not raise our voices. Let's not get too passionate about anything. Those people started taking over, and they took over the AST.
Yeah, and I think there's a place for conferences like that. So the ones like if people want to try out, talk about things in a more psychologically safe way and don't want to have that I'm just saying that piece of it I really miss, and I think we've been worse off as an industry because of that. It doesn't need to be incorporated into everything, but we don't really have a forum for it at all anymore. I know you've done a few things like hosted, peer conferences out by you, but there's no there was an energy around it to kind of hash out ideas that seems to have just completely disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's another thing that happened in 2010 that probably was a factor, and that is the rise of DevOps.
Mm.
The rise of DevOps put extreme pressure on testing because testing doesn't really have a place in DevOps. What they call testing is, well, whatever scripts you can automate and that fit into the build pipeline. So get them automated or shut up.
Right.
We don't want to have to pause and think before we press the release button. We don't want a human to be involved. We just want to send it out. And that has created just tremendous pressure that has eroded the culture of software testing. So they hear shift left, and I call it squish left, because it's not like you're moving to the left. It's you're smushed down anywhere that you try to get between the product and the customer. Like if you want to delay that product for 5 minutes, it's like, no, we're going to squish you down, and then you squeegee off to the left and to the right. It's just
But I defy anybody who uses things like shift left or whether there's shift right now. Honestly, I would defy anybody explain to me what any of that stuff means that people haven't been advocating for in good testing circles for 30 fucking years. Do you know what I mean? It's like the stuff they talk about, they don't do. they're like, oh, we want to test earlier, test often, test ideas. They don't actually do any of that. All they
Yeah,
really want to do is take this really shallow subset of testing and automate and squish that. They don't really want to do any of the other stuff.
yeah. It reminds me a little of when I worked at ST Labs. I was running project postmortems on every project as the head of the methodology for the lab, and it was really annoying the head of sales. It really bothered him that I was doing these things because we would one of the things that we would do is say, "Hey, salespeople shouldn't have promised this," and that kind of thing. So what he did is he said, "Well, James, I think really sales should run the postmortems. Uh, I really think we should do it." And so I said, "Okay." And then he immediately, as soon as he had the responsibility, he immediately stopped doing them.
Yep, that was the whole point.
Really, it's the whole point of taking it on was he wanted to not do it. That what is most of what's going on is remember we said at the beginning about horses. Horses are systems that act to optimize their own comfort. I mean, developers don't want irritating non-developers telling them what to do. That's why Agile fired the testers in the first place, as Keb Kaner used to put it. They just wanted to get rid of anyone who was annoying them. So they said, okay, look, the developer's going to go over here into this room, and you customer, you can stand outside the door, and maybe you send, well, okay, one person in, one customer representative can come in. We'll call them the product owner, whatever. And everyone else is a developer, and you guys just stay out. Just, no girls allowed or whatever, like just
Yeah.
protopia. And and the testers were frozen out because we're just these irritating flies buzzing around them. I think that's half of it right there.
Yeah.
And businesses went along with Agile because the promise was, you mean you're going to deliver faster, you say? All we have to do is give you a cardboard box and poke some holes in it for air. You don't even need furniture. You don't need offices. We can just put some bean bags and some big monitors and a couple of tables and benches, and you're just going to do all this. Wow, that's okay. If you can pull it off, we'll let you do all that stuff. But then, of course, over time, Jira came in and is the long arm of management, making developers galley slaves again.
Yep. Well, if anybody ever asks me what does Agile mean, I always say Jira.
Yeah,
That's to me, that's all Agile is
a
Jira.
whole bunch of tasks and cards and Jira. Yeah.
Yep, and all that came with the Agile and DevOps was this gigantic pile of Scrum and rituals and everything and coaching and I hope a lot of those folks save some money. Like the amount of Agile coaches. I mean, what a cottage! I wouldn't even call it a cottage industry. It was the whole industry built off of that. I mean, I don't know if there's still a thing as Agile coaches anymore. I don't run into them very often, but it seemed to me there was a complete hive of them for a while.
I never bought into that. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why I have these rivals of mine that, don't like me, is because I never joined the group hug of it's all about collaboration, and don't bother to learn your craft as a tester. Just work together. Just work together with developers and everything will be okay.
Right.
I never bought that. It did because it doesn't work. It's not the point. It's not what helps. But there's a lot of testers who were very annoyed at me for criticizing them and their loosey goosey approach to software testing. So you were to go back to what you were saying. Like, what are the things that are understandings about RSD. I think you nailed the two biggies. Uh, one is that people do think that all we do is we just encourage people to argue and be unpleasant, and we just yell at people. And I think there's, unlike the tool thing, there's actually a grain of truth to that argumentative stuff, because I do publicly argue and am unpleasant about testing things. What people don't always notice, though, is I'm not doing that to students. I'm not doing
Right.
that to, I'm doing this to people who claim, to people like who claims to be a testing expert. Although nowadays he claims that AI is so much smarter than him at testing. Like, whoa, he's nothing. He's not worthy compared to ChatGPT. But he claims to know what he's doing. He accepts the accolades, so he's a fair target, not some random guy who is passing on some idea that he got from some bad website somewhere and doesn't know any better. And I try not to attack people like that.
Right. No, I agree. I've never met him or had any exchanges with him at all. I've just witnessed a few things, and frankly, a lot of that stuff, I feel like people make so much noise about it. The relative echo chamber of the testing world, it's you have to like measure it by degrees of what additional damage will be done to our business, and like some of that stuff, like it's just some other guy shouting out in the wilderness, so I don't really pay much mind to it. Because like when I work with my clients, I mean, I work with big enterprise companies, like enterprise tech banks and retail operations, stuff like that are still trying to get their head around, like, how should we structure testing here? What kind of people should we hire? We've made mistakes here. We're having problems. We're in a regulatory issue. Like it's much more fundamental to that. So I'm probably less on the public face of some of this stuff. And so like if there's somebody out there, like a carnival barker or whatever, I tend not to see as much of that. But I agree with you.
So
if you're going to get out and make claims in public, then you should be able to be prepared to defend them.
Here's the third thing, and we saw this at Barclays. The third thing is that I guess I'm such a strong personality. I have so many opinions about testing that people think that they wrongly think that RST is about testing the way I tell them they have to test. So there was an anonymous person at Barclays who made a comment when I was working with you at Barclays, and we were implementing RST and training all the leads in RST and all that. And the comment was something like, "Oh, we all have to accept this new religion and do things James Bach's way." And I'm like, wait a minute. Have you been to any of the RST training? RST says that how you test is up to you as a tester. You are in charge, not me, not anybody else. What we're trying to do when we train you is to get you so that you can explain and defend your work. You have skills to explain and defend your work. There's no fixed best practice. So it was like, dude, are you saying you'd rather be enslaved? Are you, I'm trying to set you free.
I think I know who that person is, and their main issue is that it was so, like, the idea of challenging their whole worldview, right, and to actually apply some thinking to that was just, they were so comfortable without thinking about it anymore. It's when you're pushing somebody to do that or think differently about their work, it's very threatening.
Absolutely, it is. Like, let's say you're a master of checkers and someone says, we're all going to play chess now. and you're the top of the league as a checkers player. You think you've got it all figured out, and suddenly you're not the top of the league. You know, you're a bad chess player hoping that you can survive. Yeah, it's confronting. It's concerning.
Hmm.
Um,
And the way I coach people through that, right, is like I'm super transparent with my teams about how I do things, right? I'm like, here's how I prep for meeting. Here's how I learn stuff. Here's how I'd approach this task, and literally show them the models I use, the approaches, the notes, the frameworks, and everything I do to try and how I manage stuff. So that, and then say like, you can take all that, here's how I used it, and then you got to go figure out how that might or might not work for you, but here's how I do it. And I think people then like look at stuff differently. But if you're just giving them, say like, here, we use ISTQB now, and that's, here's what a test case is, or like one that's kind of comforting because you don't have to think about it. You don't have to apply any kind of logic or reasoning to it. But then when you ask them to actually, is this right? Does this work? Is this what we should be doing? Is there other ways of doing that? That just pushes people out. Like most people just want to go do a job and check out mentally and do their and come home every day to their family.
yeah,
So it's like not
the
everyone's going
thing
to be
is,
at that same level.
I've had people tell me that. It's like I've had people say, "Oh, James, well, the thing is, you really love testing and you want to be really good at. I'm just here because they pay me. I'm here to do a job. I don't necessarily love testing. It's just my job." And my reply to them is that what you told them in the job interview? Did you say, "Oh, I'm interested in applying for this job," and they go like, "Oh, okay. Tell us about yourself." Well, I don't really like testing, and I'm not going to try very hard. But it's a job, and I assume you're paying. You're paying, right? Yeah, that's good money. I want the money. So, can I have the job now? No. When in the interview you said, "Oh yes, I'm a self-starter. I'm a self-starter. Oh yes, I excel at everything that I do." So you told a bunch of lies. You must have told a bunch of lies if now you're telling me that you're not really interested in this job
Well,
and I'm
there's
asking you
getting
too
the
much.
job and doing the job, and then there's doing the job that needs to be done, which can be very different than what you're being asked to do. And I guess my point around it is that's a real pressure on people to like not want it. That's why it's so hard for organizations to change their culture. One, because I think it's made of the people and it's very difficult to change people. But like if you want to get, and you've heard me bang on about this for a long time, like increasing the value of testing in the organization, it's hard work. It takes a lot of work, and a lot of it is going to be your own woodshedding and taking it on yourself to do. And the arc is long; it doesn't move in quick jumps. You don't suddenly say, like, "Oh, okay, oh, we get it now," because the other thing that is a kind of backlash to giving people good risk analysis through testing is a lot of people in senior positions can look at that and go like, "You're telling everybody how I screwed up." Right? And you're pointing out all the areas that we didn't think about for risk. And so I would prefer not to know that. So there's a lot of built in kind of institutionalized bias towards good testing anyway. So I try and just, I understand when people push back a little bit. But my view is, okay, well, then let's find something else for you to do. Let's maybe push you into in another area. But that
Yeah,
whole test
follow your
management
bliss.
layer is filled with people who feel like that.
We worked 2 years introducing this culture into Barclays, and then it was destroyed in a nanosecond as soon as a new CTO came in
Yeah.
with all of his
But it did. But
all of
it
his
didn't though.
power.
I disagree with that. One, there's still some folks there, but two, it was a bit of the Obi-Wan, right? You strike me down, you only make me more powerful. Yeah, they broke up some of the team, but there's still a lot of folks there, and the propagation of that into the
Yeah,
industry.
I later went to the UAE and worked
Oh
in a
my
bank
God, it's
there. There
phenomenal
were some
where
ex
people have
Barclays
ended up.
people in Abu Dhabi, and I worked with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I'll send you the list. They're everywhere, James. It's actually quite an impressive list of people who are running testing somewhere, who are,
yes.
a couple CTOs. It's been an impressive group of people that have kind of moved out from that. So, yeah, I mean, my energy for keeping all that together, you know, ran out and I moved and everything else. And so it was difficult to do. And there's a lot of, people come in. I'm working with a client right now that's having the same thing. They change, some CIO, CTO comes in as a different idea of what they want to do. Well, you know, they change things the way they want. So there's some of that, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it was, I think it changed form, right?
Well, I hope you're right. I
I
mean,
know,
I
I know
hope
I am.
I hope so. Because I just had a sense of just being really depressed when you left Barclays, and they were like apparently really interested in going back to counting test cases, baloney metrics, all the silly things. And I felt like, oh, we worked for 2 years, and
Yeah,
it's
but what
just so
happened was,
easy. It's
it,
so easy to destroy a, a culture that's based on human judgment and human fellowship.
yeah,
It's very easy to mess. I first experienced that at ST Labs, where I learned that one nutty CEO can make it impossible for the people who work for him to work together.
yeah,
Uh, I didn't realize that before, but the guy was telling different people different things and didn't want us all to get in one place at the one time to compare notes on what he was telling us. So
right.
he was keeping us from working together. And we didn't realize that this was like an intentional campaign to undermine our ability to call him on his what he was doing. But it was quite effective. You know, I look back and I was like, yeah, he made it so that we couldn't work together and we couldn't trust each other. We didn't know what was going on, except in retrospect. And it is always possible for somebody to create an environment of fear and distrust
Mm.
and stress that that makes it impossible to do really top-notch work.
Well, and there's so many things that, like, when I start doing, like, companies will bring me in to review their test organization or model, whatever they're doing. And the first thing I always start looking at is, like, how are people comped, right? Because the behaviors that drives more behavior than anything else. And so if they have structures in place that are, you know, anti incentives to collaborate, to work together. They're not rewarded for those types of behaviors. You're
Yeah,
only gonna, there's a limiting factor on what you're gonna actually able to change there because they're not
yeah.
getting rewarded for it, and their leaders don't, model those behaviors. So
Yeah,
you're
I've
kind
seen
of
that so many
starting.
times. I had a client once. They had me come in and spend several weeks. I had several visits to their Chicago location, and they wanted me to tell them how to have a fully professional, world class testing organization. So I worked with someone very passionate in that organization who was inside of it. And we worked together. We came up with 8 recommendations that we felt strongly about, wrote up a whole thing about like each one, what its benefits were, what its costs were, what are the first steps, and had this whole document. Went to the C staff, met with them. They accepted 7 of the 8 recommendations. I'm feeling pretty good. Then nothing happened. But that's not the end of the story. That's like very typical. Like nothing happened, right? Well, here's the end of the story. So we go back to management about this. Like, so we agreed we were going to do this, right? And then they told us, oh, this is a self organizing company. So it doesn't matter that we, the C staff, think these are good ideas. You have to go and talk to the 25 teams and convince all of them to do it. And none of them wanted to do any of this stuff. So this was a company where the C staff refused to lead. I don't know what they thought they were doing. I guess sitting on a pile of money, yelling down to the people at the bottom of the pile saying, heap up more money, faster, faster. I don't know what they thought their job was.
Yeah.
But they gave me a bunch of money to produce a report that they did nothing with after telling me, oh, you look, good job. Yeah, we like these ideas. I sure hope somebody around here does that, like says the COO.
You're encouraging
Not
good
that I have
behavior.
any control over anything in this organization. I'm just, what I the COO? What does the COO do anyway? I don't know. Nobody knows what a COO does. We don't have any power to make anything happen. So
Well, people ask me that about like that. People ask me like, what should you have a centralized test team that kind of works, has interior line management and works on projects, or should you embed your testers within I'm like, I honestly couldn't give a shit. What you want is people with autonomy over how they test your stuff, who have the ability to make independent decisions on how to test stuff, and then a good channel for risk to whoever's paying for or managing the project. Some companies that works better when they're embedded. Some companies that works better because it's a cultural thing.
Well, it's a
You're
false
focusing on the
dichotomy.
wrong stuff.
It's a false dichotomy, though. Look, at Borland, we were working shoulder to shoulder, like 3-4 paces away from developers. We were all mixed together, working with them every day, but I didn't work for developers. I was a test manager who worked for a testing director who worked for the vice president of the business unit who had revenue responsibility. And so that was important because we were essentially an information source that was going right to the VP, and he didn't have to just talk to the developer people and the development manager and trust whatever they said was the truth. He had an independent source of information because the developers couldn't fire us. We worked with them. We were embedded in the sense that we were working with them every day. And it's just that we weren't afraid of the developers.
Right.
We didn't have to get along with the developers. We wanted to get along with the developers.
Yeah.
But
getting along with people, Michael and I talk about this all the time. I was just writing some stuff about it. Getting along with people doesn't mean you remove your objectivity or your ability to critique what they're doing. And my view is, in an organization, a tester's role that's the service they're providing.
But you got to resolve the conflict of interest. So if I'm working for a developer and I know that if this developer has the whim of getting rid of me, then I'm going to go. My job is always, I've got a sword of Damocles over my head and the developer has the scissors. I can cut that any time. Then I'm going to behave differently toward that developer.
Or the soft control of your bonus and review, right? So a tester reporting in a developer, I mean, there's a lot of bias there towards, well, did you help me get my releases out? Because they're probably comped on how much they did.
Yeah, now it's one thing to I want to treat the developer with respect. I want him to like me, but my performance review is done by a test manager who understands testing. And I can go to that person and say, I know, right? You know what I'm trying to do over here. And you're going to provide me top cover. You're going to explain what we're trying to do to top management. And they're not just going to hear from the developers that their testing is irritating. They're going to also hear from my own management structure the testing is doing what they need to do to protect the company by informing us of the status of the situation. When that went away as a normal part of the industry right around the end of the 90s, and then it started, more and more of the industry started going toward this everybody works for developers. um it it deeply weakened the testing industry. It made smart people not want to be testers. I mean, who
Mm.
wants the aggravation? Like, I'll
And
just
I think when
be
you
a
like
developer.
combine that with the powerful outsourcing and offshoring elements to this, where
Yeah,
testing was like looked at as a black box, we just dropped things in and it came out the other end tested, combined with these, kind of the DevOpsy
yeah,
agile stuff. It
that's a
really
big
did
issue.
have a devaluing effect on. And you're right. I think a lot of smart people didn't want to be in testing, you know, because it was commercially unviable at some points.
So you've got, whatever you do, however you organize it, you have to deal with the conflict of interest. If I speak up, am I going to be making a career limiting move? Maybe I shouldn't speak up about this bug, this inconvenient bug that I found at the last minute. Maybe I should just pretend I didn't see it so that people won't be rolling their eyes and upset with me. Uh, so this is the biggest thing. You want very effective testers. You need to put them in a nurturing environment, an environment where they can trust in the people, that the people around them want them to be there.
Yeah.
I don't like the word safety. I never really use it for myself. It always makes me feel like, what am I, a kid? I need training wheels. Like, I can deal with risk, but when I'm dealing with risk, jumping out of an airplane or flying an airplane or whatever, I have to trust my equipment, and I have to trust the people I'm with, that they're going to do their jobs. So
Well,
there is it's not like, you can be doing a very unsafe thing, like jumping out of an airplane, but nobody does unsafe things like that where they can't trust their equipment. So,
yeah, I think to me, like with safety on that is like what I want to create is an environment where where people feel they can some people, they're not like you and me. They're where can no problem with conflict, right? Some folks, and you got to coach it out of them or create environments that they feel safe to express issues, concerns, things they've observed. And I'm speaking just purely about the testing process, forget about their kind of, work environment, but that they feel like they can express things without they're not going to get, you know, critiqued unfairly or at all. Or like, and I think you just got to like have multiple, it's context for at the personal level,
people say they
like,
don't want to be judged. I don't think anybody means that. I think what they mean, but they don't say, is they don't want to be judged unfairly.
yeah,
Want to be judged uh, constructively. They want to be judged optimistically. They want to be judged um, in a way that sees the good in themselves. I mean, we all want to be judged and found worthy.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't think there's
Well,
anyone who doesn't want to be judged. But when they say, like, oh, I feel like, so, judged, or whatever, what they really mean is there's a hostility that they
yeah.
worry
And
about.
my view on that, just like with, I refer to as word policing. I just kind of meet people where they are, right? Different clients call things different things. I want to understand and have a semantic argument around what you mean by the words that you use, and then we'll be able to work together. And the same thing with people who feel like, that they maybe need to have a one-on-one. Or they're okay to have that critique in the
I try
open.
to do that, but I mostly fail because I'm so excited. I've worked so hard on practicing saying things in ways that are powerful. It's kind of like I'm like one of those programmers who goes on about functional programming is so much better than imperative programming, and look what you can do, and they'll just talk your ear off about that, and you're like, I don't really care. I just use TCL. I just use Python. I don't care really. And they're like,
But to
oh,
me,
you
we have different
Philistine.
we have different roles in the industry, though. Do you know what I mean? It's like I'm trying to get them. I think we're trying to get them to the same place. We just have different models for getting them there. And you know, you
Yeah.
know, it just I'm maybe more morally pliable for some of that stuff. But I've never seen that conversation with a client who I'm trying to get to do better testing or manage risk, focusing on words. It instantly polarizes it, and I have to work twice as hard to get them somewhere else.
Here's something that I'm trying to learn to do that's really hard for me, but I've decided I need to learn to do it. My normal way of arguing and in writing anyway on like on LinkedIn is I'll start off what I'm saying with a statement of my position. Uh like this is crap, period. And then I'll explain it. And what I'm trying to do, I'm practicing with this, is I'll write that and then right before I post it, I just get rid of that first sentence. And I got this idea from someone else who was writing about how you can be more persuasive online, and I don't even remember where I read it. It was recently I read this, and the guy convinced me that by making that first sentence saying, "Here's my clear position," you're greatly reducing the probability that anyone's going to change their mind. But if instead you start with the reasons and you kind of don't have your own conclusion until the end, until after the
Right.
reasons have flown through, you're giving them a chance to loosen up a little bit. Maybe they'll come to the conclusion themselves. And it's just so different from my habit. I always used to think that's the right way to approach people is to tell them what your red lines are and what the non-negotiable things are right up front, like to save time, right? But what it does is it's like this. I learned this in my first marriage. In my first marriage, I learned never talk about divorce unless you mean to get divorced right now. Don't ever say, we can always get divorced if it doesn't work out. Just never say that. Don't refer to the ejection seat. Like there's a handle, we can just pull it. Do not do that. Because it will just hasten the end of your marriage. And so I learned that in my first marriage. And similarly, I'm trying to learn to not polarize the situation or let on that something is a deal breaker for me
Right.
until we've let the issues like flow a little bit, and then maybe they'll come around to my way of thinking and I'll never have to reveal that there was a deal breaker, and
See,
that's so
now
much smoother.
if I was with the same situation there, and I'll give you an example of a program that I worked on last year to help turn around, where testing was like viewed as a big problem, late, all the classics, right? And so I came in there, and they were like, there were some really smart people in testing working on it. I didn't care anything about the reports we were producing, what they were calling things, and that part of the where I wanted to get to was at the board meetings. Testing wasn't represented there. Testing had no influence over the program. They weren't listening to anything that they had to say. So I focused on how do we build up credibility to get there. And that doesn't start with word policing, right? Even though that stuff makes me just as nuts as anybody else, and I understand all the arguments about it. And after about 3 months, we were in the boardroom. We were producing test reports for them. They were understanding, and testing became one of the biggest influencers on the direction of travel for the program. But if I would have started out with, okay, here's the reports you guys need to write, here's the words we need to use, here's how it is, people would instantly go like, oh, this guy's just,
So how did you start?
Well,
it wasn't with word policing. What did you police?
what we did, right, is a big part of it. And I generally, when I start with these, scale back most of the comms out of the test team until we can, it's not uncomplicated, and it's a lot of legwork actually. Meeting with people, talking to them, interviewing the testers. I read everything that the team produces, all the back data, everything, just so I can understand how they got there. Because the last thing you want to be is somebody who comes in and says, it's so easy to come into a new environment and go, oh, well, this is all crap. You guys should have done this, and this. Well, organizations and programs evolve over time, and they're organic, and people make decisions with bad information, so you can't just come in and shit all over everything and say, oh, we should have done this. So really spending most of my time understanding the how they got there, right, curtailing the information out of the test team so that I kind of take control of that to start and say, like, if you want information about testing, come to me. I'll tell you. And I spend a lot of time working with the testers to understand how they're testing things, the gaps, looking at coverage, and start to funnel that through me. And then once I understand who the strong players are in the testing team, start bringing them up, shadowing with me so they can see how I talk about testing in meetings, how I talk to to try and quickly deputize people to that. Then it propagates rather quickly when they see, oh, we had some success with that. The other thing I do is, like, again, really try and limit the kind of BS data that goes to the board and talk more about, like, risks to dates, cost, things like that, so that they understand, oh, okay, well, this guy's not going to come in here and tell me a bunch of crap about test pass-fail ratios and all this other shit we don't understand and never did, but really talk about, okay, well, what I'm seeing is, and almost do oral test reports as opposed to putting a whole lot on paper. And then the kind of last bit I would do is focus on, kind of high level RAG status reporting for them on the big risks. So identify what are the key risks we need to manage to, how is testing going to get you information about that, and then just draw a straight line there. So the amount of test reporting that comes out that's numbers based out of the test teams that I run is fairly limited. And we just focus more on actual testing and finding problems, and it's much more orally based than kind of writing a lot of stuff. And after time, and the other thing, just probably my nature and who I am as a person or how I do things is very tied up in that. I don't speak a lot in meetings. I listen a lot, and then what I say when I do talk, I try to make extremely fact-based. Lots of people in meetings just are talking. They have no idea what they're talking about, or they're just, kind of improvising at the time. So I just make sure everything we have is very fact-based. It's coverage-based, it's risk-based, and then just keep at it, and that's how I would approach a situation like that. But it doesn't start with, trying to correct the reports that are already probably meaningless to say things that I want them to say differently. Does that make sense?
I mean, sure. One thing that I'm getting from what you're saying is a thing I picked up from all of Jerry Weinberg's work, which is his 3-word consulting process, which goes center, enter, turn. You center yourself, then you have to find a way to enter someone else's system, and then you have a chance of nudging it. That's what he means by turn. Not transform, not reinvent necessarily, but nudge, no turn. But first you have to enter the system before you're going to be allowed to do that.
Yeah. Jerry's writings on that stuff and his work on his consulting stuff has influenced me way more than his anything he said about testing. And actually, a conversation I had with him before he passed, we talked a little bit about that. And I always say, like, meeting people where they are. right? And find, like you say, entry, trying to find a way that's that decoder ring. What do you mean by what you're saying? You know what I mean? And then you
Yeah.
can,
I just have this issue where I feel like a medical doctor in the modern day encountering someone who's wants me to help them get better health outcomes, and he's talking about uh, black bile, yellow bile, choler, and phlegm as the four humors. And he says, like, now what should the right balance be of the four humors? And I'm like, it's not about the humors. And he's like,
yeah,
what? Not
you
about
mentioned
the
that. It's,
humors. Next,
yeah,
you'll be telling me there's a circulatory system.
it's just, that's really funny you mentioned that, because my younger son is in doing his GCSEs right now, and they're talking about one of the things they're studying is the history of medicine, and they were talking about the bodily humors with my older son at dinner the other day, and I showed them that, you remember that old Steve Martin Saturday Night Live skit where he's the who's the barber here, and they're talking about
Yeah,
bodily humors and stuff.
that's right.
I told him, I said, this is actually how a lot of people in my business still look at what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Harvey, who discovered the circulatory system, lost a lot of his patients because he wrote this book, this weird book that challenged the Galenic orthodoxy that was 1,500 years of tradition, and he challenged that tradition, and he paid a price for it. And also, there's a lot to be learned from Lister, the guy who was all about washing hands, and well, not just washing hands, but sterilizing instruments. And all these people were living who were dying in. And he tries to come down to London and say, "Here's what I do," because they were interested. Like, oh, people are living more and they're not dying as much when you operate on them. Tell us what your methods are. He shows off the methods, and they're like, "What? We can't do that. We have to do like 14 surgeries a day. We don't have the time to do all this stuff with carbolic acid, and like, it's totally unrealistic, Lister." And so they didn't follow his advice because it wasn't economically viable for their business model. It was
Right.
better to have 90% of their patients die of
Yeah.
infections, but they could at least keep their metrics up,
Right.
Um, so that's how I feel sometimes, is like one of those guys challenging this orthodoxy that comes from nowhere. It's I
Mm,
mean, the orthodoxy that we see prevalent today about testing is the same nonsense that was there in 1987 when I started. And the people who are promoting it weren't in the industry in 1987, which means that they got it from someone who got it from someone who got it from someone.
yep.
And there's just this uninterrupted line of not critical thinking.
Yeah.
And I was there. They could have paid attention to my stuff 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Well, 1993 was my first conference talk. Um, and at my first ever talk was that was recorded was a thing called Organic Quality Assurance from 1990. That's 35 years ago. And I wish I had that. I used to have the tape, the cassette, but I lost it in one of my moves.
Yeah.
I want to go back and see what I was saying, but you can tell from the title, Organic Quality Assurance. What I was trying to do is to talk about heuristics, although I didn't know the word heuristic back then. I was trying to talk about dynamics, and I was trying to talk about context driven stuff, although we didn't have the word context driven. I didn't have the words to clearly express this. So a lot of it was like hand wavy, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Balance this humor with that humor. I was basically talking about humors of a different kind. Uh, but
Yep.
but since then, we've learned a lot about social science, and there's a lot of well-established social science behind the kinds of things that we're talking about. And but yet there's this ancient tradition that won't go away because it's so naively satisfying. Like
Well,
Aristotelian
it's still profitable.
it's it's still, well, it's sort of profitable. I mean, the testing industry is kind of crumbling. It's hard to to be a career tester anymore. I don't know how many real career testers there are left in the entire industry. Uh,
Well, I mean, I think a lot of them are. It's there's still some growth left, and I think there's a lot of people tucked into large vendors. I think there's been more consolidation than people out doing it independently.
yeah, I also think there's a big difference between companies like Facebook, Google,
Yes.
Twitter. I don't care if these people change their names. I know their true names. The original Elvish name of
Yeah.
Meta was Facebook.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so those companies, the super tech companies, pure software tech companies, they have a very different approach to software that is much more hostile to testing, to professional testing, than companies like Ford, which or Volvo or Adidas, which I found when I taught there is supposed to be pronounced Adidas. Always that freaked me out.
True.
And then I taught at Bombardier, and I asked them how you're supposed to pronounce it. Is it Bombardier or is it Bombardier? And they said, we don't know. So I just chose Bombardier since it was
Okay.
Europe. But I was shocked that the employees of Bombardier aren't quite sure how to pronounce the name. But that if you go to some of these other companies that are not software companies, but that they produce real things, there are still testers there,
Right.
and they still kind of take testing seriously there, even if Google doesn't. Google stopped taking testing seriously in the early aughts. It was
Well, that's when you could just release things on people and then change it on a whim if you wanted to.
if your business model is monopoly, you can do anything you want. You don't why worry?
A la Microsoft.
Just pay the fine. Like, catch me if you can, and I'll pay a fine if I have to. That's the Musk way.
Yeah.
So, but if that's not your business model, if you're not powerful enough to do that, if you can't abandon hundreds of products the way Google can do, then testing might matter. It might matter a lot. That's why I like doing medical device testing. That's kind of my favorite sort of testing to do, because they know they don't want to kill people. They know they don't want to be sued for almost killing people. They know they don't want to have their product pulled from the market because one bug was found in it. So they know testing is important. They don't necessarily understand what good testing is, but they do know it's important, and they do know they want testers.
Stakes are higher.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there, James.
All right. Well, 2.5 hours. That should be.
Yeah.
I'll go to sleep.
We could go on for probably a couple more. We'll have to do this again soon.
It's a particularly nice talking to you, Keith, because normally on a podcast I talk 95% of the time, but I love that this was a balanced conversation. It's just felt more comfortable for me. I didn't feel like I was hogging all the oxygen.
Oh, good.
So,
I'm a well-documented, can go on and on.
You're also a drop-dead fucking expert in this, so I appreciate that too.